My name is Linda Taylor. I was raised to believe that if you worked hard and followed the rules, your family would stand by you. But at my father's retirement party, in front of everyone, he handed my legacy to my brother and laughed off my career, as if I'd never mattered at all. Can you imagine being erased like that? Stick around, because this story is about what happens when the invisible daughter stops asking for permission and starts building her own empire. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. It was one of those golden hour evenings in Denver where the light makes everything look more tender than it really is. My dad's backyard was strung with fairy lights and warm chatter. Guests hovered near the grilled salmon platters, clutching flutes of cheap champagne and sharing knowing glances. The occasion, my father's retirement party. I had picked out a soft blue dress, not too formal, not too loud. The kind of thing you wear when you want to be noticed, but not accused of trying too hard. My mom insisted I bring her famous potato salad, the one she used to win church picnics with, and I did. I still show up when asked. Jake, my younger brother, strolled in late, sunglasses still on even as the sun dipped behind the Rockies. He's the kind of man people call a real character, right after he makes a joke at someone else's expense. Our dad clapped him on the back like he'd just won a war. There's the future of Taylor HVAC, Dad boomed, raising his glass. And there it was, just like that. No announcement. No sit-down conversation. Not even a warning. The business, the one I'd sorted invoices for as a teenager, the one I'd spent my Saturdays helping clean out during slow winters, had officially been handed to Jake. The same Jake who couldn't hold a job until last year. The same Jake who once flooded a client's basement because he skipped the manual and guessed on the fittings. Dad laughed as he told the story, adding, Linda here's doing great too, teaching the little ones their ABCs, very cute stuff. He actually winked. I felt my smile freeze midair. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Someone murmured, "Oh wow," behind me. And then he said it. But hey, teaching's not a real profession anyway. It's more like glorified babysitting, right? The crowd laughed. Can you feel the slap in that sentence? Because I did. My cheeks burned not from the sun but from the humiliation. I opened my mouth, closed it, took a sip of lukewarm champagne to keep it together. My mother didn't meet my eyes. Jake smirked and clinked glasses with someone, and I realized no one was going to say anything. So I did the only thing I could think of. I excused myself. Quietly, politely. I walked past the patio lights and into the side garden, the one with the broken fountain I used to fixate on as a kid when I didn't want to cry at family events. Behind me, laughter roared like waves. My father's voice cut through it all, declaring Jake a true man of the house. I blinked back tears as I sat on a cold stone bench near the lavender bushes. For a moment, I stared up at the sky, as if it might offer me a different family from above. All I ever wanted was to make my father proud. But in that moment, I realized something devastating. I could cure cancer and he'd still toast Jake for remembering to show up. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, right there in the shadows of someone else's celebration, was the start of everything. The moment I stopped trying to belong to their version of success and started dreaming up my own. I didn't go back to the party. I waited until the sky turned ink blue and the porch lights flickered off one by one. My car was parked far down the block, behind a row of rose bushes and quiet houses that didn't know betrayal had unfolded just 2 doors down. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel with clammy hands, blinking too fast at the stoplights. The next morning, I showed up to our usual Saturday brunch with my teacher friends. I almost didn't. I nearly texted to cancel. But something inside me, maybe pride, maybe pain, pushed me out the door. The cafe was tucked in the corner of a strip mall, nothing fancy. But it smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, and for once, the warmth didn't feel fake. I spotted the girls immediately. Ellie waved me over, her red curls bouncing as she moved the extra chair for me. Jen and Sandra were already nursing lattes, and the table was cluttered with lesson planners and scribbled math games. Linda, Ellie said, eyes soft, how was the retirement thing? I sat down slowly. My voice caught before it even formed. Then I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because that was the only sound that wouldn't come out as a sob. He gave the company to Jake, I said flatly, wrapping both hands around the mug they'd ordered for me, almond milk chai just the way I like it. Jen blinked. Wait, Jake, you're Jake. The HVAC business, Sandra clarified. I nodded. You worked there every summer, Ellie said. I remember you used to fix their QuickBooks errors while tutoring third graders on the side. Apparently none of that counts, I replied, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. I teach preschool now, and according to my dad, that's not a real profession. The table went silent. Then Jen leaned forward. That is utter crap. I'm sorry, but what? Sandra said, scandalized. You're one of the best educators I know. Those kids worship you. Jake once called a thermostat a room button, Ellie muttered. And your dad's letting him run the business. They tried to lighten it with laughter, but the sting didn't budge. I swallowed hard. I know it's ridiculous. I know I should let it go, but I don't know, it hurts more than I thought it would. Like somewhere in my gut, I really thought maybe he'd say he was proud of me, just once. You don't need his validation, Jen said firmly. Seriously, Linda, you're doing sacred work. I smiled weakly. Sacred doesn't pay much. And then, I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the low hum of compassion in the room. Maybe it was the fact that for once no one was asking me to be smaller so someone else could shine, but I said it. I've been thinking about opening my own preschool. They froze, not in horror. In that beautiful, rare way people freeze when they hear something true, Ellie's eyes widened. Wait, seriously. It's just a thought, I said quickly, suddenly embarrassed. Like a daydream. I used to sketch it out in a notebook during college. It'd be Montessori-inspired, but with more play. And I'd make sure every kid had one-on-one reading time each week. I even have a name in mind, Bright Grove. Jen leaned back slowly, letting it settle. Bright Grove, that's beautiful, Sandra grinned. You'd make it magical, like actually magical, fairy lights and finger paints and kindness policies. I don't have the money, I admitted. And I wouldn't even know where to start. You started, Ellie said simply. You said it out loud. The table fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt full, not hollow. And then Ellie added, you know, my uncle's friend just retired and he's selling his daycare property in Aurora. It's small. Rundown, but I could get the listing. My heart thudded. Seriously, I asked. She nodded. Just promise me one thing. What? When Bright Grove opens its doors. You let us come decorate the reading nook. We all burst out laughing, loud and genuine, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like someone's forgotten daughter. I felt like a woman with a spark in her hands, and maybe, just maybe, it could become a fire. They say when you leap, the net appears. But what they don't tell you is, sometimes the net is you. Just you. Worn-out sneakers, a stubborn streak, and a vision that keeps tugging at your chest no matter how scared you are. The building looked worse in daylight. A narrow one-story brick space in East Aurora with peeling turquoise trim, a cracked front window, and a faded for lease sign barely holding on. The roof sagged slightly to the left, and the last tenant had left behind piles of torn carpet, half-dismantled shelving units, and a few faded stickers on the walls, smiling animals waving hello from a better time. The air smelled like old glue and anxiety. I fell in love instantly. This is ambitious, the real estate agent had said, gently adjusting her blazer as if the building might stain it. You're sure you want to buy? I'm sure, I told her. She raised an eyebrow. You're a teacher, right, preschool? I'm also a woman who can use a drill, I replied, only half joking. And who just inherited a condo no one wants. That was true. My grandmother's apartment had sat vacant since her funeral 2 years ago. It was small, nestled above a dry cleaner and facing an alleyway, but she'd always said it was rich with peace. I couldn't live there. Too many memories. But I could sell it. And I did. One open house, 2 competing offers, and suddenly, for the first time in my adult life, I had breathing room. Not enough to be reckless, but just enough to be bold. The morning the sale closed, I drove straight to Aurora with the check still warm in my purse and my heart slamming against my ribs. When I signed the papers for the new place, my hand trembled. But I signed them anyway. No one cheered. No one called to say they were proud of me. My parents didn't even know yet. But something inside me whispered, you don't need their applause to build your own stage. I moved in that night. The back room, formerly a supply closet, became my bedroom. I dragged in my college futon, a lamp with no shade, and my grandmother's old wool blanket that still smelled like peppermint and books. There was no heat in the back, and the front door stuck so badly I had to throw my shoulder into it every morning. But it was mine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of sweat, splinters, and YouTube tutorials. I wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. My hands became rough with calluses I hadn't known I could earn. I learned how to patch drywall, anchor shelves, clean baseboards with vinegar and sheer force of will. I cried when I accidentally smashed my thumb with a mallet, and again when I fixed a leaky sink all by myself. There was no blueprint, no mentor. Just me and a dream I didn't dare say too loudly in case the world tried to laugh it out of me. I spent my days painting murals across the cracked walls, bright forests with smiling squirrels, stars tumbling from rain clouds, children of every color holding hands around a giant oak tree. The more I painted, the more the space stopped being a daycare. It became Bright Grove, a place where small people could grow tall. Every night I fell asleep to the sound of passing cars, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But every morning I'd wake up, stretch out on that futon with aching joints and paint in my hair, and think, this matters. I dumpster dived behind an old school warehouse and found 5 usable kid chairs. Drove 2 towns over for second-hand cubbies a retired teacher was giving away. Traded tutoring hours for donated art supplies. One day I carried a bookshelf 2 blocks on my back because my car had broken down and I refused to leave it behind. Sometimes I whispered to my grandmother's picture, tucked in my bag beside my city permits. Am I crazy? But I already knew the answer. I wasn't crazy. I was becoming. The neighbors started noticing. A woman in the bakery next door knocked one afternoon and offered me a thermos of hot coffee. "You've been here past midnight 2 nights in a row," she said. "You working miracles in there or something?" "Trying to," I smiled, and for once I meant it. I took pictures of my progress and saved them in a folder titled Proof. Not to show anyone, not yet, just for myself. For the days when I'd doubt what I was doing. It wasn't pretty yet, but it was mine. And every scraped knee, every scuffed elbow, every moment I thought about quitting, was laying the foundation for something no one could take from me. Not Jake. Not my dad. Not a world that treated preschool teachers like glorified babysitters. Bright Grove wasn't just a school in progress. It was a future forming, one mural, one screwdriver turn, one stubborn, invisible woman at a time. Some mornings, I'd wake up before sunrise and forget where I was. I'd reach out expecting to hit a bedside lamp, and instead my hand landed on a crate of donated books. My back ached. My knees popped. My bank app told me every day that I was inching toward broke. But Bright Grove was starting to breathe. I'd managed to transform the largest room into a cheerful classroom. The cracked linoleum was covered by a patchwork of thrifted rugs, and I'd found a chalkboard in a dump pile that, with some sanding and a coat of black paint, looked almost vintage. It wasn't Pinterest perfect, but it felt real, like it had character, like it was ready for life to walk in. Still, I was tired. One afternoon, I was elbow-deep in trying to assemble a second-hand play kitchen with a screw missing and instructions that may as well have been written in ancient Greek when I heard a knock at the front door. I groaned, wiped my hands on my sweatshirt, and opened it. And there he was, Mr. Callahan, my old principal. He looked exactly the same. Same kind, tired eyes. Same neatly trimmed silver beard. But instead of a clipboard, he held a large cardboard box taped with bright blue duct tape. "Mr. Callahan?" I asked, startled. "Linda Taylor," he smiled. "I heard you were starting something special." I blinked. "How did you?" "Ellie," he said. "Her niece goes to my wife's church. Word travels." I stepped aside to let him in. The classroom smelled like paint and sawdust and cinnamon-scented cleaner I'd gotten on sale. I suddenly saw it all through his eyes, the half-finished murals, the mismatched chairs, the small signs of struggle. But he didn't look critical, he looked proud. He set the box down gently like it was breakable. "My wife and I retired last year and we've been slowly clearing out our garage. These," he tapped the lid, "are from the old resource closet, before the district started tossing everything." I opened it. Inside were books, dozens of them. Picture books, alphabet flashcards, math counters, soft puppets in nearly new condition. At the bottom, stacked like treasure, was a full wooden cubby wall disassembled but intact. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "These are beautiful," I whispered, lifting a cloth book about friendship from the top. "Mr. Callahan, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Linda," he replied, voice soft. "You always had heart, even back when you were a student teacher. I watched you work with the kids no one else had patience for. I remember thinking she's going to change the world, but probably not from inside our system." I felt a lump rise in my throat. I hadn't cried in weeks. I'd been too busy. But right then, with the smell of old books and kindness filling the room, the tears came. He stepped back respectfully, giving me space. I wiped my cheeks with the sleeve of my hoodie. "Thank you. I didn't know how much I needed this." "You're not alone," he said gently. "It may feel like you're building this place with just paint and stubbornness, but people believe in you. Sometimes they just need a door to knock on." He stayed for a cup of coffee and a mismatched mug, and we talked about kids, the education system, and the quiet revolution of doing things differently. Before he left, he gave me one more gift, a phone number. "Call this guy," he said. "He installs floors for small businesses at half rate. Tell him Callahan sent you." As the door closed behind him, I looked back at the box, the books, the cubby pieces leaning against the wall. It didn't just feel like a donation. It felt like someone saying, "Yes, keep going." Bright Grove still had no students. No staff, no guarantee of success. But it had one more thing now, momentum. You never realize how loud hope is until it fades. That first Monday, I woke up before dawn, heart racing. My blouse was ironed, my hair tied in a soft bun, and I'd even put on the silver locket my mom gave me in college, the one I hadn't worn since things got strained. I stood in front of the mirror in the tiny back room, practicing my welcoming smile, the one that said, "You can trust me with your child." The door chime was polished. My flyers were posted in every grocery store bulletin board, church entrance, and pediatric office within 10 miles. I had listed Bright Grove on parenting Facebook groups, added photos, typed and retyped my mission statement until the words felt etched into my bones. I even put a chalkboard sign outside with pink writing, "Now enrolling, ages 3-5, where little hearts grow big." And then I waited. By noon, the smile I'd practiced was brittle. By 2 p.m., I was refreshing my email every 3 minutes. The only new message was from a local pizza chain offering a BOGO deal. I thought, it's just Monday. Parents need time, but Tuesday came and went. So did Wednesday and Thursday. I wore the same outfit again Friday because I hadn't moved enough to make it dirty. At the end of that first week, I erased the chalkboard sign and replaced it with, "Come see what we're building." It felt more hopeful, less desperate. The next week, I lowered the price, just a little, enough to maybe draw someone in. Still no calls, no emails, not even spam. I checked the doorbell to make sure it worked. It did. I tested it 5 times. And then slowly I stopped opening the blinds in the morning. By the 3rd week, I stopped brushing my hair. I lived off canned beans, instant oatmeal, and black tea. I wrapped myself in 2 cardigans and curled up in the nap room, trying not to think about the stack of unpaid utility bills under my futon mattress. I wanted to believe in divine timing, in patience, in process. But every day, the walls whispered something different. You were never enough. Not for your father, not for Jake, not for them, and not for this. I started second-guessing everything. Should I have offered free trial days? Should I have painted fewer murals, spent that money on Facebook ads instead? Should I have waited another year, another job, another life? There was one moment, one sharp, brutal hour when I actually drafted a post to sell the space. Just to see what I could get. I typed the words. "Charming child care center space for sale. Motivated seller." I couldn't even finish the sentence. Because how do you sell your own heartbeat? Nights were the worst. Cold and silent. I didn't cry, I didn't have the energy for it. I just lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles, counting things. How many screws I'd drilled by hand. How many times I'd told myself I was building something beautiful. How many days it had been since someone said my name like it meant something. I missed my old classroom. I missed sticky fingers and lunchtime knock-knock jokes. I missed the way kids shouted, "Miss Linda," like I was magic. Now the only sound in Bright Grove was the ticking clock and the occasional rattle of pipes behind the bathroom wall. And yet, every morning I still unlocked the front door. I still lit the cheap candle I bought for the reading corner. I still fluffed the bean bags and wiped down the shelves and rearranged the markers just in case a child walked in needing color in their life. No one came, but I stayed. And that, I guess, is how you learn the real weight of believing in something no one else can see. I hadn't walked the halls of Lincoln Elementary in over a year, but there I was, holding my breath outside the front office like a teenager about to ask for their job back after storming out with a dream in their pocket. Bright Grove was clean and colorful and empty. My bank account had $63.84 in it. I'd done the math a dozen times. Even rice and beans wouldn't stretch another month. So I walked back to the place I left behind, my old school, and prayed they had room for someone like me. Not full-time, just a few hours, enough to keep the lights on. Ms. Gomez, the school secretary, blinked when she saw me through the glass. "Linda," she said, sliding open the window. "Oh my gosh, what are you doing here?" I gave a sheepish smile. "Looking for work," I said. "Just part-time, subbing, maybe, lunch duty, whatever you've got." She didn't ask why. She didn't make me explain. She just reached over and buzzed me through. The school smelled the same: crayons, cafeteria food, and hand sanitizer. I passed the trophy case and caught a glimpse of my reflection. My coat had a coffee stain, and I was clutching my tote bag like it might vanish. I didn't look like a woman building an empire. I looked like someone asking for crumbs. Principal Levy saw me in the hallway and stopped mid-stride. "Linda Taylor," he said with a grin. "We heard rumors you started your own school." "I did," I said quietly. "It's slow going." "Well," he said, eyes twinkling, "we always said you'd shake up the system, didn't expect it to be so literal." I met with the assistant principal, filled out a few forms, and was told I could start subbing as early as next week. Relief washed over me, warm and aching. It wasn't what I planned, but it would keep me afloat. As I was leaving the office, a voice piped up behind me. "Miss Linda." I turned. A small boy with a puffy jacket and mismatched mittens stood there, wide-eyed. His mom was behind him, carrying a baby in one arm and a lunchbox in the other. The boy beamed. "You were my teacher in pre-K. You had the stickers with the shiny frogs." I blinked. "Elijah," he nodded furiously. "I still have my green star. It's on my door." His mom stepped forward, smiling. "We've been wondering where you went. Elijah talks about you all the time. Every time we drive by that empty building on 6th, he says, that's where Miss Linda should make her school." My throat tightened. "That is my school," I said softly. "It's called Bright Grove now." Her eyes widened. "That's your building. I saw a post about it on the parent board. Everyone thought it was corporate." "Nope, just me." "Well, you should say that," she said. "Parents talk, and we trust you. I'd enroll Elijah's little sister in a heartbeat." I laughed. "Once I get more than one chair that doesn't wobble, I'll let you know." But she was already pulling out her phone. "Do you have a website?" "Just a Facebook page for now." She clicked into it, found the page, and tapped follow. "I'll post about it tonight," she said. "You're the real deal, Miss Linda. You make kids feel seen. That's rare." As she walked off, Elijah waved so hard his mitten fell off. I stood there frozen, clutching my tote bag, my eyes stinging from something that wasn't the cold. I'd come here thinking I was crawling back. But what I found instead was this. They hadn't forgotten me. Not the parents, not the kids, not the warmth I thought had faded. I wasn't invisible here, I was remembered. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first brick laid in building something bigger than a dream, something real. It started with a knock. Not the heavy kind that says you forgot to pay a bill or the hesitant kind of a delivery drop-off. This was light, warm, curious. I was in the middle of cleaning out the art supply shelf, which was mostly half-dried glue bottles and off-brand markers that didn't quite make it through their second wind. The knock startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Certainly not after weeks of no-shows and silence. I wiped my hands on a towel, stepped over the baby gate that marked the classroom boundary, and opened the door. 3 women stood outside, one holding a diaper bag, another balancing a toddler on her hip, and a third clutching a thermos like it was her last ounce of sanity. "Hi," the one with the thermos said. "Are you Miss Linda?" I blinked, momentarily frozen. Yes, I am." She smiled like that confirmed everything. We heard you opened your own place. I stared at them. You did. The parent board's been talking about it, said the one with the toddler, who now had a crayon sticking out of her hair. Someone posted a picture of the mural out front. My daughter said, "That's a happy wall, I want to go there." I stepped back instinctively, motioning them inside. It's not finished, I warned. I still have some boxes to unpack and the snack bins are a work in progress. They didn't seem to care. As soon as they stepped in, their kids made a beeline for the bean bags, the low bookshelves, the plastic animals arranged in a circle on the play rug. The third mom, who hadn't said anything yet, exhaled slowly as she took it all in. This, she whispered, feels like what school should be. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. They moved around the room with ease, touching things gently, asking real questions. Do you use a play-based model? How many kids do you plan to take? Are snacks provided or do we pack them? I tried to answer with the calm confidence of someone who'd practiced this 100 times. But inside, I was shaking. After a few minutes, the toddler's mom looked up and said, "Are you still taking children?" I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to get my hopes up, again, but I smiled. "I'm always open for learning," I said. The three moms laughed, like really laughed. It was the kind of laughter that echoed a little in the hallway and wrapped around me like a hug I didn't know I needed. "We'd like to enroll," said the thermos mom, pulling a small planner out of her bag. "Do you have registration forms?" I nearly cried. Instead, I reached for the folder on the counter labeled Welcome Packets, which I'd printed weeks ago and kept untouched in a drawer I avoided looking at too often. By the time they left an hour later, the playroom looked lived in. Someone's child had drawn on the chalkboard wall. The frog puppet had lost an eye again, and one of the moms had already offered to bring in a basket of puzzles we're not using anymore. As the door clicked shut behind them, I leaned against it, letting the quiet settle again. But this time it felt different, alive. I didn't move for a minute, just breathed. Then I turned the Welcome Families sign back around on the front door. I pulled open the blinds. I turned on every light in the building. And I walked into the classroom, not with dread, but with a whisper of joy in my chest. This was no longer an empty dream. Bright Grove had just gotten its first heartbeat. It started with a sound I didn't recognize. A soft, almost polite gurgle from the back of the building, like the walls were clearing their throat. I was restocking the art shelf, humming to myself after what had been the best week yet. 3 children, real, live, sticky-fingered students. Their laughter had lingered in the air long after they left each day. I didn't know that kind of joy could live inside a building. So when I heard that strange noise, my body tensed, but my brain said it's probably nothing. I was wrong. By the time I reached the nap room, water had already started seeping in through the tile seams. A cold, creeping puddle spread across the floor, soaking into the corners of the reading rug. I stood there for a beat, unable to move, unable to even curse. Then came the burst. A full-on spray of water exploded from behind the bathroom wall. The pipe, old and rusted and clearly offended by my optimism, cracked open like it had been waiting for the perfect moment to betray me. I scrambled to shut off the main valve. Thank God I knew where it was, and stood in silence as the last few drops dripped into what was left of my calm. Soaked towels, a warped bookshelf, the nap mats, the good ones I'd saved for, curling at the edges. The room reeked of rust and defeat. My phone buzzed. I checked it, an automated text from the bank. My balance had hit $17.08. $17. I sat on the floor right there in the hallway, water still clinging to my sneakers, and let my body sag against the wall. It was the kind of tired that doesn't come from work, but from hope being stretched too thin over too many days. This is it, I thought. This is where it ends. I imagined calling those mothers, telling them Bright Grove was closed until further notice. I imagined pulling down the posters, unpinning the dream. I could already hear the voice in my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like my father. Told you. Teaching's cute, but not a career. This was always going to fall apart. For 5 minutes, I let the sadness win. Then I stood up. I grabbed a mop. I threw the ruined mats into trash bags. I opened every window to let the damp out. I didn't stop to think. I just moved, cleaned, Dried, sorted what could be salvaged, I was furious. At the pipe, at the universe, at how hard it had been just to be seen. And then, I sat at the small desk near the front window, opened my laptop, and applied for a microloan. I didn't know if I'd get it. I barely qualified. But I filled out the form with shaking fingers and the full weight of what this dream had cost me. I told the story in the Why This Matters section, about the murals and the empty hallways and the moment a little boy remembered my name like it meant magic. I hit submit. Then I exhaled. The next morning, I returned with new towels borrowed from a friend and opened the door for my 3 students like nothing had happened. I didn't want them to feel the cracks behind the walls. I just wanted them to feel safe, joyful. After they left, I checked my email. The loan was conditionally approved. A tiny one, just enough to fix the pipe, replace the mats, and breathe for 1 more month. I stared at the screen, and for the first time in days, I smiled. Bright Grove wasn't broken. Not yet. Not as long as I could keep showing up. Because maybe that's what building a dream really is, not the absence of disasters, but the decision to keep mopping, even when the water feels endless. The new nap mats arrived 2 weeks after the pipe incident. They were nothing fancy, plain blue, vinyl-covered, and smelling faintly of plastic and lemon disinfectant. But when I laid them out that morning, I nearly cried. Because they weren't soaked. They weren't ruined. And they represented something bigger than comfort. They were proof that I was still standing. And then, as if the universe had been holding its breath for me to cross some invisible line, the calls started. One mother told another. A dad from the local parenting board emailed to ask if I had room for twins. A woman who ran a nearby yoga studio stopped in to say she'd heard about the little school with the bright tree wall. I wanted to ask how they all suddenly found me, but I didn't. I just said, "We'd love to meet your child." Bright Grove began to fill, not in a flood, but in the steady, soul-saving way that feels earned. A 4th student joined, then a 5th. By the end of the month, I had 9 enrolled and had to rearrange the playroom twice to fit the extra tables. The reading nook, once painfully quiet, became a cozy hub of whispers and giggles and wiggly legs trying to sit still during story time. The cubby wall Mr. Callahan donated was suddenly not enough. I had to install a second one, painted by one of the moms, who insisted we make it rainbow. "Because every kid should feel like their color belongs here," she said. I hired my first assistant, Keisha, a bright, endlessly patient woman who had worked at a nearby preschool until it shut down during the pandemic. She came in for an interview, saw the murals, and said, "I think this place is special." I grinned. "I think you are too." By the end of the week, Keisha had names memorized, allergies logged, and had taught the kids a new song about hand washing that I still catch myself humming while doing dishes. Then came the 10th enrollment. I don't know why that number hit so hard. Maybe it was because it filled the last chair I'd originally set out. Or maybe because it was double digits, a milestone. But when I posted a photo of our group painting activity that day, and the caption read, "Bright Grove is blossoming," I felt a quiet awe settle over me. Because it was. This place, once full of doubts and dust and $17 panic attacks, now pulsed with life. Kids skipped through the doors every morning. Parents lingered just a little longer at pickup, asking how their child did that day, offering to bring snacks or spare tissues. Someone even brought a donation of picture books in honor of a teacher who once saved my daughter's confidence. I saved that note. It lives in my desk drawer beside a folder labeled Expansion Ideas. Yes, expansion. Because in those small, sacred pockets of quiet after the last child was picked up and the chairs were stacked, I started sketching. Ideas for a second location. Ways to bring on more staff. What it would take to build a place where more children could feel safe, seen, and celebrated. The dream wasn't just alive now, it was growing legs. Running. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the window at dusk, hair messy, shirt smudged with finger paint, clipboard in hand, and I'd barely recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because I finally felt different. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't trying to be the good daughter, the quiet helper, the overlooked supporter of someone else's legacy. I was the architect now, and with every squeal of laughter, every little voice calling out, "Miss Linda," Every goodbye hug at 4 p.m., I felt the roots of Bright Grove pushing deeper into the soil of this community. They saw me. And more importantly, I finally saw myself. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. Something about the cinnamon, the pageantry of setting the table just right, the way we'd all pile into the kitchen pretending to help while Mom swatted us away with a dish towel. But now it was something else. A test. A tradition soaked in thinly veiled competition. Who had achieved more, bought more, gained more admiration from Dad this year. And Jake was always the golden boy. The second coming of success, as Mom liked to say when she'd won too many mimosas. I pulled into the driveway 30 minutes late. Not because of traffic, because I sat in my car around the corner rehearsing how to be unfazed. The house looked the same as ever, neat hedges, pumpkin wreath, the porch light already glowing despite the lingering sunlight. Jake's Mercedes was parked right up front, polished to the point that it reflected the neighbor's house like a mirror. I parked in the street. My old Honda made a concerning noise as I turned the engine off. As I stepped inside, the familiar warmth and scent of cloves and turkey wrapped around me. So did the sound of Jake's voice booming from the living room. Company's already turning a profit. Dad says it's the best first quarter in 5 years. I stepped into the hallway quietly, unsure if anyone had seen me. But of course, Jake did. "Hey, there's Linda, the boss lady of babysitting." He grinned, raising a glass of bourbon like he was toasting a roast. "Hi, Jake," I said flatly, removing my coat. Dad emerged from the kitchen, his smile tight. "You made it," he said like he genuinely doubted I would. "Wouldn't miss it." Jake followed me into the dining room. "Still running that daycare thing." "Preschool," I corrected, setting down my pie. "Oh, right, where finger painting is serious business," he smirked. Mom came in behind him, setting down a gravy boat. "You're still doing that, sweetie. That's so nice. You always did like kids." I resisted the urge to look up at the ceiling. "Yes, I'm doing that. We're full, actually. Just added a wait list." "Really?" Mom blinked. "That's surprising." Jake chuckled. "Well, people need somewhere to drop their kids while they work." "Some of us work with them," I said. That silenced him for a beat, just long enough for me to see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Dad sat at the head of the table. "Let's eat, enough business talk." We passed dishes in silence for a while. The turkey was overcooked, the wine too sweet, but the tension. Perfectly seasoned. Eventually, Jake leaned back in his chair, all confidence and car wax. "Got a new model coming in next week," he said, twirling his fork. "Upgraded the office too. Sleek glass desk, espresso bar, real CEO stuff." I kept my eyes on my mashed potatoes. Then his girlfriend, Melissa, barely 25, all lip gloss and politeness, looked at me and said, "Wait, your school's called Bright Grove." I glanced up. "Yes," she beamed. "Oh my gosh, my cousin's daughter goes there. She's obsessed with it, always coming home with these sweet little projects and stories. I thought it was some fancy franchise. I didn't realize it was yours." The table stilled. Jake's fork clinked against his plate. I met Melissa's eyes and smiled softly. "It's mine." "No kidding," she said. "Small world." Dad cleared his throat. "Well, that's good for you." And there it was. The thing I'd craved for years, acknowledgement, finally on the table next to the green bean casserole. But it wasn't the meal I thought I wanted. It was lukewarm, underseasoned, too late. I didn't need their praise anymore. I didn't need Jake to stop making his snide jokes. I didn't even need my father to understand that I wasn't playing teacher. I was building something real. They could have their wine and their smugness. I had a wait list. I had families who called my school magic. I had little humans who greeted me with joy every morning, and teachers who told me they felt respected for the first time in their careers. So I sat there, smiling to myself, sipping my too-sweet wine and letting them all think I was still the quiet one. Let them joke. Let them mock. Let them overlook me one more time. Because my time, it was coming. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was spaghetti day at Bright Grove, and the kids were wearing plastic smocks decorated with cartoon forks. Laughter echoed through the classroom as tomato sauce painted happy chaos across their faces and napkins. And then my phone buzzed. Not a call. A message from Ellie, of course. My oldest friend and part-time gossip whisperer. "Is Jake okay?" Just saw something about his company closing. I stared at the text for a few seconds, my heart slowing down instead of speeding up. Jake. Closing. I searched his company online just to be sure. And there it was. A local business article, dry and brutal. Summit Innovations abruptly shutters. Sources cite financial mismanagement and a failed product rollout. I clicked. Read, reread. Turns out Jake's next big thing was a gamble that didn't pay off. A custom app platform they poured half the company's funds into. Glitchy, overpriced, and abandoned by investors 2 weeks after launch. Within days, the board pulled out. Employees walked. The office lease defaulted. The empire he built on Dad's praise and borrowed bravado. Gone. And me? I just stood in the break room, surrounded by the smell of garlic bread and apple juice, holding a phone that suddenly felt too warm. I didn't laugh. I didn't smirk. I felt nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because part of me had been waiting for this moment so long, it had already lived 1,000 versions of it in my head. In none of them, though, did I feel this calm. I went back into the classroom and finished story time. Later that night, while cleaning out the cubbies, I opened my laptop and pulled up the auction listings for Summit's remaining assets. The company was officially being liquidated to pay off debts. The building, the furniture, the name, up for grabs. I stared at the property photos like they were ghosts. I'd walked those halls as a teenager, sweeping floors during summer breaks. I knew the layout better than Jake ever did. I remembered begging Dad once to let me shadow in the accounting office. He laughed and said, "You're more of a coloring book kind of girl." Now, that same building was available, and I had enough saved for the down payment, not just from Bright Grove's tuition, but from the microloan, the grants I'd been applying for behind the scenes, the quiet scholarships from parents who insisted on giving back. I didn't tell anyone, not Keisha, not my friends, not yet. I contacted a small business lawyer I'd met at a networking event months earlier and asked if he had time for a consultation. He did. We met 2 days later in a tiny office near downtown. "I want to buy a commercial property," I said, sliding over the listing. He scanned it. "Ah, Summit, that's been all over the local feeds. You know the owners." I smiled faintly. "I know enough about them." He looked at me a little closer then. Maybe he saw it, the spark of a woman reclaiming something she was never supposed to touch. "This could work," he said. "But you'll need a bold plan and thick skin, this kind of move people remember." "I'm counting on it." We drew up the paperwork. I submitted the intent. The auction date was set for 2 weeks later. And every day leading up to it, I didn't feel nervous. I felt right. I still ran Bright Grove like usual, played the same piano songs during nap time, drew smiley faces on permission slips. But inside me, something was shifting. This wasn't just about Jake. This was about the inheritance I was told didn't belong to me, the business I was told I'd never understand. The crown passed to a brother who never asked for it. This was about walking into a building they said I couldn't run and turning the lights on myself. And if that meant Jake had to sit in the shadows now, so be it. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not Jake, not my parents, not even Ellie. Let them be surprised. The morning of the auction, I pulled into the parking lot of the county business office, heart steady. I'd parked my rusted Honda behind the building, but this time I hadn't arrived in it. I stepped out of a sleek silver Mercedes. Rented, yes, but no one needed to know that. It wasn't for show. It was for me. For every time my father looked through me. For every Sunday dinner where Jake was the headline and I was the afterthought. For every time someone called my school a daycare and my job a hobby. The automatic doors slid open. Jake was already there. He stood near the glass wall, looking pale, rumpled, smaller somehow. Not the polished man with cufflinks and confidence. His hands trembled as he signed papers with a lawyer who kept glancing at the clock. Dad sat in a chair against the wall, legs crossed, arms folded tight. When he looked up and saw me, saw the heels, the pressed navy blazer, the purposeful stride, his eyebrows lifted, but he said nothing. Jake turned just as I approached. At first confusion, then recognition, then disbelief. "Linda," he asked, "what are you doing here?" I didn't blink. "I'm here to close." His mouth opened, then shut. "You're buying something." "I already did," I said, handing my packet to the auction clerk. Silence thickened around us. The woman behind the desk flipped through my paperwork, then smiled. "Everything looks good. You're now the registered owner of the property at 1630 Halstead Avenue." Jake's face lost all color. Dad stood slowly. That's Summit." I met his eyes. "Was." He stared at me like he didn't know who I was. Maybe he didn't, because the Linda standing in front of them wasn't the one who'd cried in the guest bathroom after being told teaching wasn't a real profession. She wasn't the girl who let herself be invisible, or the one who needed permission to dream. She was the woman who built something from nothing. And now she was taking back the building her father gave away like it had never belonged to her. "Why would you?" Jake started, his voice cracking. I smiled gently. "Because it's a good property, and I have a growing business. I need space." He looked like he wanted to say more, maybe rage, maybe beg. But the weight of the moment settled on him. His empire was gone, and now it was mine. Dad finally spoke, quietly. "You'll be running it." I didn't hesitate. "On my terms." There was no speech, no outburst, just a shift. A slow, dawning realization on their faces. They couldn't laugh this off. They couldn't call it babysitting anymore. I signed the final document with steady hands. Then I turned, heels clicking on tile, and walked out. Not with a crown, not with applause, but with something better: control. A year later, I walked into a room that used to belong to Jake. Same glass walls, same desk. But now it held crayon portraits and framed thank you notes from parents. A drawing of a tree with handprint leaves hung near the entrance. The name Bright Grove shone in soft, carved wood above the door. We had 4 locations now. One in Aurora, one in Lakewood, a new one under construction in Thornton, and this one, the crown jewel, the headquarters, the heart of it all. Jake didn't come to the ribbon-cutting ceremony, but he did start sending in monthly operations reports. Yes, he stayed on, not because I needed him, but because he needed something to steady himself. I didn't gloat. I gave him the job he used to hand out to friends of friends. Now he knew what it meant to answer to someone else. Dad visits sometimes. He says things like, "You've really turned this into something, and your teachers seem happy." The praise is clumsy, unsure, but real. He brings homemade cookies, too sweet, in plastic containers with loose-fitting lids. At our last family dinner, Jake didn't bring his car keys into the house. He brought spreadsheets and asked my opinion on a vendor contract. No jokes, no jabs, just quiet acknowledgement. I still drive the Honda some days, not because I have to, but because I like remembering. The silence, the setbacks, the nights I almost gave up. They make the laughter in Bright Grove's halls feel earned. This isn't just my business. It's my boundary line, my legacy. My homegrown proof that no title, no inheritance, no last name decides what we're worth. We do. And to every woman watching this right now thinking they'll never take me seriously, just wait. They will. When you show up with receipts, when you bloom without permission, when you stop waiting to be crowned and build your own throne instead.